How do you leverage paid ads to grow your podcast's reach and visibility? That's what we're covering in today's episode with my guest, Megan Shields. And actually, we're talking about this over the next 4 episodes on the show, which I'm so excited to bring you this information and this value because I think it's going to be a game changer for you. Now, before we dive into anything podcast related, I first want to share with you that today's episode in this entire series is brought to you by my new membership called Podcast Success Vault by my company called Volt Productions. This monthly membership is your ultimate lifeline for starting, growing, and monetizing your show. I've heard from creators that this membership is unlike anything else that they've seen in the market, and it helps fill a gap for creators just like you to simplify your podcasting journey. If you're feeling overwhelmed by the thought of launching your show or the tech that goes behind it, or maybe you're struggling to grow your audience, I want you to say goodbye to confusion and hello to confidence with our all-in-one membership. By joining Podcast Success Vault, you will unlock comprehensive resources, plug-and-play templates like show notes, media kits, graphics, and pitches, including brand deal pitches, expert guidance from me, and collaboration with a community that empowers you to shine your light and empower your voice and bring it to the mic every single time. Whether you're just starting out in the podcasting world or you're scaling up, we have got you covered with our membership and would be so excited to see you in there. We have monthly and annual plans available, and there is no commitment for joining us. So be sure to check out the link in the notes below for more information. Okay, now we're going to talk about today's episode with my guest, Megan. Over the next 4 weeks, we are covering all things related to paid ads. In today's episode, we are talking about the fundamentals and introducing her trifecta strategy. We're talking about setting up your account, pixels, meta, boosting posts, and podcast ads versus freebies. Megan is a wealth of knowledge and a paid ads expert specifically for podcasters. So I cannot wait for you to hear our conversation. Let's get into it. Megan, welcome to As It Relates to Podcasting. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so excited to dive in across this 4-part series with you all about podcast ads. I love that we are talking ads, and I also love that we're talking about it specifically for podcasters because it is not something that anyone is really niche down in. So I'm really here for this conversation because I think you're going to bring a lot of perspective to the listeners today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm super excited to chat more about this and just get it out there. So thank you.
You're so welcome. So the way we're going to break down this 4-part series is you have a 3-part strategy that you take with your clients and in the work that you do, right? And we're going to talk about those 3 strategies in individual episodes that are following this episode. So if you're tuning in for the first time to this episode, be sure to listen to this one and then wait for the next 3 episodes, which are coming week after week, which is really exciting. But this first episode that we're talking about today is fundamentals. So we're going to overview a little bit about your trifecta strategy, and then we're going to talk about some basics and the fundamentals when it comes to the podcast ad space, if you will. But before we get any further into it, I really want to know, what is it about podcast ads specifically that you like working with and like working in versus just regular traditional ads?
Yeah, so we started our business back in 2020. So we're coming up on 4 years now, where the first probably 3 of them, we were really working with a lot of different businesses, but we were working with like the online coaches, course creators, working heavily in like the digital product space, that kind of thing. And that was fun. And then a friend of mine who's a podcaster came to me and was like, hey, let's try some stuff. See if it works. And, it just kind of started off like that. And then I actually ended up pivoting my entire business because I liked it so much. So what I found was I just loved working with podcasters. It's been really fun. We vibe super well. And it's such an interesting marketing medium, like from an ad standpoint too. People that listeners and people that tune into your podcast, it's super, super impactful and can have a really long-term growth benefit. And a lot of my clients tend to be business owners with podcasts where they're using their podcast as like a marketing medium to build, affinity with their audience, position themselves as experts, nurture them over time, that sort of thing. And it's just really, really powerful. So bringing more people to that has been really awesome to see. So yeah, it just happened on accident, but it's turned out to be awesome.
I love that. And those are oftentimes the best redirections and like the best way that things can actually happen. And so, okay, when it comes to paid ads specifically, do you find that, especially podcasters, like, do you find that there's like a big gap in knowledge? Because I feel like most podcasters are pretty techie. Most people can figure things out, right? Especially if you DIY your podcast, you figured it all out. You know, you've launched the whole
Right.
thing on your own. And so how difficult would you say is it to sort of wrap your mind around leveraging paid ads for your show,
Yeah.
and why?
But yeah, I think there's two levels or two sections to this, because one is I feel like, when I started getting into this market and doing a lot of market research around, because I don't have a podcast yet. That's coming later this year, most likely. But I really did a lot of market research around, how to position this, to find out what people knew about it, their level of expertise, like all of that, because I just didn't really know. And what I found was like, most of the strategies around growth, a lot of them are organic, but especially when you're talking about social media. So like it's a lot of post on Instagram, post on Facebook, get people to rate your show. And it's kind of like a slow and steady grind, which there's nothing wrong with that. It does work, but what ads do is kind of speed that process up. But what I found was just people didn't really know or think about using ads in that way. And so as far as I know, I'm the only person that's doing this, which is why I'm like, I need to talk to everyone, because we've seen great results with our clients and it's been super fantastic. But it's just like a knowledge thing. I just don't think people think about it. When they think podcast ads, they're thinking ads by sponsors on my podcast. They're not thinking that I can leverage Facebook and Instagram advertising to get my content, to get my podcast in front of more people. So there's an education component, which is where, the way that I'm presenting it with social media and that kind of thing is just letting people know that you can do that. And then the second piece is just Facebook ads are super intimidating for anybody, podcaster or not. The user experience is terrible. And even someone who runs ads and is in there every single day and has managed hundreds of thousands of dollars in ad spend, like, it's not any better for us. We just know how to navigate it. So it's,
Exactly.
there's the knowledge, the lack of knowledge of not really knowing that you can use that, but also just the intimidation factor of, you probably have gotten in there and you are techie and you understand things, but like Facebook is just so nuanced and it's changing so much that like, it's really hard for the average person that's not in there all the time to really keep up and understand what's going on to make it effective for them.
Absolutely agree with you. Absolutely agree. I've run a couple of ads, different ads to my podcast, and like I've seen like a little bit of a bump, but even just getting the whole account set up and like doing all of that. And like, I'm like, what is a pixel? You know what I mean? Like all of these different things. And like, I would classify myself as a pretty techie person. Okay. I figured out most tech. Okay. And I still was like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. And
Yeah.
so when you first start out, so let's say for my listener right now, it's like, okay, I want to get started with paid ads. Obviously, you need to start by setting up your account, right?
Yeah.
What are some like fundamental things that need to be sort of taken care of on the back end of that to make their ad spend the most effective?
Yeah. So setting up your account, when you go to business.facebook.com, you'll set up your business manager account and you want to make sure that your correct Instagram is linked up to that, your correct Facebook. So you will have to have a business Facebook and a business Instagram. So that's the first place to start, making sure that those are set up correctly. And then you want to make sure that you link up your domain and put all your business information in there. You technically don't have to do that anymore, but that's something for me. I've been doing it for so many years that like I make sure that all my clients do those things so that Facebook never has a reason to shut down their account or believe that they're not a legitimate business. So verifying your domain, wherever you're going to be sending traffic to, setting up all of your business information in the business info section, verifying your email address, turning on two-factor. Just as a PSA, two-factor is not automatically turned on. So if you are in there, you want to make sure that that is turned on in your security settings. I don't know why. I mean, I think it's because you have to actually go through the process of setting it up, but there should be a pop-up or something that says like, hey, by the way, now that you're set up, turn on two-factor. There's not. So maybe the meta gods will hear me and they will do that. But until then,
I mean, they're always listening, let's be honest.
right? I know. I wish they would just tell me that they're listening so I can start creating audiences and using it for ads. Like,
but actually,
So two-factor is not set up. You want to have that set up, and then you want to make sure that you create a Facebook pixel, which all the pixel is a little piece of code that you put on your website that tracks how people interact with it. That's really all it does. And it learns by that. So even if you're not running ads, but maybe you're like, well, I want to run ads in 3, 4, 5 months when I launch a program or XYZ, whatever that is, it's still good to have the pixel now because it will gather data no matter what, even if you're not running ads. So those are really the main fundamentals that you want to get set up in your business manager account before starting to build out ads.
Okay. So if you're someone like me, for example, who has 2 different podcasts that lead to 2 different places, right? Like I have 2 different websites. Would you do 2 different pixels, or can you only do 1 pixel?
So you can do as many pixels as you want, but when it comes to that, I generally don't recommend doing more than 1 pixel unless it's 2 entirely different audiences. If it's 2 totally different, like people that you're talking to, and it's like a different business, different strategy, then I would create a second pixel for that. Because what the pixel does is it learns about the people. And then when you create ads using it, like I want to run ads to people that, look like people that have visited my website, that data becomes really effective in creating high performing ads because it knows the people to look for. But if you have 2 different avatars, it can get jumbled. And so if you do have 2, then that's when I would recommend doing 2 separate pixels.
Okay, I love that. And so obviously things are managed through the business manager, and that connects to, Facebook and Instagram, which is what we're talking primarily today. Like we're not talking about, your Google ads or TikTok ads or like anything like that. This is primarily Facebook and Instagram. So you have your pixel set up and you're managing all of this through Meta. What do you think about boosting posts? I'm curious.
Yeah. So the experience of boosting posts seems to be easy, but I always tell people, if you're going to spend money with Facebook, always do it through Ads Manager because you're going to get better results. Boosting posts is, I think, Meta's way of being like, let's collect another $3 billion today. And then we'll put a pop-up on Instagram that's like, hey, just boost this post for $5 and you'll reach however many more people, which sounds good, but you have so much more control over who you're targeting and your strategy over boosting posts, because boosting really is just getting it in front of some of the people that follow you to maybe get some more likes. You can't really have a robust strategy with it. So if you're going to spend the money, do it right and do it in Ads Manager.
Love that. Okay. So is there anything else in terms of like the fundamental things that podcasters need to know? Like when you're going through and, picking your audience, are there guidelines around audience size that you should stay around, or like location? Should you target the location that the data is showing in the back end of your podcast on your hosting platform? Or is it okay to sort of expand into a new market and try and get even more reach that way? And like how much reach would be too much reach? Because I think that there is such a thing as going too broad. I could be wrong though.
Yeah, I mean, there is to a certain extent, but the great thing about creating audiences is you can create them to be targeted towards people that are interested in what your podcast might be about. But you can also create audiences that are called a lookalike audience, which is you could base it on your email list. So what it does is the system will find people that look like or behave like that core audience of your email list or your Instagram followers. That's a new one that came out last year where you can actually create an audience of your Instagram followers. And so there's a lot of different audiences that you can create from your own data, from Facebook's data, and then also you can create behavior and interest-based audiences. So, I mean, as far as getting started with that and like how big should they be and going into different markets, like most of the clients I work with are digital entrepreneurs, so they aren't really held to a specific location. We have run ads throughout the United States and it's been fantastic. We haven't really narrowed down to like a specific location because they're digital entrepreneurs. If you have a super hyper local business, then sure, it would make more sense to focus locally. But if you structure things the right way, like you don't want to have an audience that's like 10 million people generally, but Facebook is favoring larger audiences now. But if you stay around the 2 million mark, generally, without getting into campaign semantics, you should be good.
Okay, cool. No, that's really good to know, because I remember when I was setting up my ad to my podcast, it was to this podcast actually. And when I was setting up the ad to that, I would like narrow in on specific things. I would add, interests and behaviors, location, demographic, and whatever. And you can see the audience size start to, dwindle down a little bit, which is a good thing, but it'll tell you like, this is a good size audience. Like this is a sweet spot audience. I was just curious if the guidance that they're giving is actually accurate, or is it just kind of like tested and just figure it out on your own?
Yeah. So 99% of their suggestions you should ignore.
That's good to know.
Yeah.
I'm like, wonderful. Okay.
And they're very good at like spooking you when you're building ads, because they're like, you're going to get no results. And you're like, oh my God. But that's not the case. But yes, they're very good at that. So using the audience size definition is good. Like I use that a lot to try to get into the right realm of the amount of people that I want to target. But when you're doing that, like you want to make sure that you're targeting similar interests. Like I always like lump them together, like interests, so you get a good idea of like how effective the audience actually is. But yeah, most of their suggestions you can ignore, but the audience size, that's based on data from Facebook. And so it's a good way to get a good idea of your audience. But there's different campaigns that, like sales and leads campaigns, require a larger audience than something like traffic and engagement. So you can get more niche in the traffic and engagement type ads versus the leads and sales, where Facebook favors a larger audience. And that's where you might be in the 2 to 5 million minimum when you're launching those campaigns. So hopefully that
Yeah,
answers your
100%.
question.
So then when you're running different ads, are you running them to someone's website, or are you running it to like, so in the past, like I run mine to Chartable, because in my mind, I was like, if someone clicks on Chartable, they can see whatever platform they want and then they can click through. But then it's like, is that too many clicks? You know what I mean? Like, where should people be running these ads to, especially for a podcast? Like ideally your website?
Yeah, so we've done it a couple different ways where we have, I always recommend people to have their podcast on their website, hosted on their website, because I'm a big fan and believer in like owning your data and understanding where people are coming from. So like we use Google Analytics to be able to see all the traffic sources coming to websites. So if they have it on their website, we've tested running it there. And we've also tested running it to specific episodes, and both have done well. It just kind of depends on the client and their audience. And so it's just one of those things, like when it comes to ads, you can ask questions till you're blue in the face, but you will never know until you start running them. And that's where the power is when you start getting that data back and see what's happening, then and you can make more decisions based on that. Because there's been so many times where I've run an ad where I'm like, this is going to kick ass, and it like totally doesn't. And there's another ad that way outperforms, or there's an ad where I'm like, I don't think this is going to do that great, but it ends up killing it. Like you literally just don't know. But the power is just being patient, getting the data, figuring it out, and then making smart decisions on that going forward.
Love that. And then, so now you figured out what links you want to run to. Would you recommend for someone who's a beginner to run their links directly to their website, or run it to something like, because there's so many options of things that you can like, where you can lead to? Like, is there a different button that you would recommend people go to, or is it a good place to start to test and to see your data running that link running the ad directly to a website link?
So you can do 2 different ads doing both, and that's generally what I will do. So it's not one or the other. Like I'll run multiple ads where one might go to the website and one might go to the podcast as a whole, and one might go to an episode. And then I just kind of see how that pans out, because the thing about podcasting is like the back end analytics are not super easy to figure out. So if we, are running it to the website, we have a little bit more control and more opportunity to gather better data, because that's your proprietary site and you can add Google Analytics and whatever other tracking stuff that you want to get an idea. But yeah, so we just test them that way. Like you can do them all at the same time. So every time when I get started with clients, I will do at least minimum of like 3 ads where one's a static image, one's a carousel, one's a video. And then I let them all run simultaneously and go from there. Video is murdering right now across the board for all of my clients, but especially with podcasting specifically. So that's where I'm starting to like make people now. I'm like, make me more videos because I'm like, they're just doing super well. So yeah.
Okay. So Megan, I feel like this is really valuable information as you're getting started and as as people are starting to create their different ad plans and like their different ideas for how they want to run ads on their podcast. And I guess two main things come to mind. One of the pieces I want to talk about is, how much money should you be putting behind this to start? But something that just popped into my mind was, is this something that you can leverage in the launch phase of your podcast? Like running paid ads to a trailer or to like a sign up page or something like that? Is that something you might recommend?
Yeah, I mean, it's not something that I've ever done, but strategy wise, it's definitely something worth trying. If I were to do it with somebody, like I would recommend having some sort of sign up page and not just, you could do kind of an awareness thing, but I think like a sign up page or a wait list or something like that would be more advantageous if you're looking at it from a paid ads perspective, because then you'll have an email list of people that you can reach out to. So
yeah,
that's probably how I would do that. I haven't done it, but that's probably how I would do that.
Okay, that's cool. I like that. And I know that's also one of the parts of the strategy that we're going to talk about too in a later episode is like the whole email marketing piece. So before we dive into what the trifecta is that we're going to be covering over the next few episodes, can we talk a little bit about ad spend? How much should you how much should someone spend? Because I feel like there's this idea that in order to have effective ads, you need to be spending $20, $30, $40 a day consistently for like months and months and months. That might not be in everybody's budget, right? So where would someone begin if they want to leverage this strategy of running ads to their podcast, but they don't know where to start?
Yeah. So the thing that happened, so when this whole pivot happened and got me into working with podcasters, my friend that came to me, he's a podcast coach. He's got a membership where he teaches people how to monetize their podcasts and build their businesses and that kind of thing. And he was like, I want you to come up with a strategy that is like zero tech and super cheap. And I was like, oh my God, like my brain melted because I had been running ads in such like a intricate capacity for so long with like webinars and these like long funnels and all these crazy things where like tech was bananas. And so when he said that to me, I was like, oh my God, like, can I even do this? And turns out you can. And we were able to do it, really, really cost effectively, like $10 a day for, podcast growth and social media growth. Cause that's, the trifecta for us and our strategy is podcast growth, social media growth, and email list growth all together. And so the really, really expensive campaigns are the ones that are like the sales campaigns because everybody is choosing that objective and that's a really crowded space and you're going to pay a lot more money because it's an auction site to get in front of the people that Facebook deems as people that are going to convert. But that doesn't mean that there's not a bunch of other people on the platform that wouldn't buy from you or wouldn't come in your funnel or something like that. And those are the ways that you can get in front of that same audience for a lot cheaper. So yes, like our trifecta ad strategy starts at $10 a day, can go up to $20 a day, but there's 3 different pieces to it. So if, the most expensive piece is really the email list piece, which we'll talk about in a later episode, but you don't have to do that one. You can do the social and the download piece, and you can do both of those for like $10 a day. So, it's really just about obviously your budget being budget friendly, but choosing the right campaign objectives. And yes, you can be very successful in, growing your traffic and growing your audience for like dollars a day.
I love that. Love that. Okay. Well, this was super helpful. We are diving into on our next episode, the first part of the trifecta, which is download/podcast growth. Is there anything else you want to add or say or mention when it comes to the fundamentals piece before we say goodbye?
Nothing in particular, but I would just say don't be afraid of it. It's easy to tackle and Facebook ads can really, really help. You just have to kind of muscle through that beginning phase. But once all that stuff is set up, you don't have to do it again. So it's just a little bit of pain for a long-term gain.
I love that. Thank you so much, Megan, for joining me on the podcast today.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode on As It Relates to Podcasting. Check out the links in the show notes below. All of Megan's links are there, and be sure to grab her freebies so you don't miss out. My links to my freebies are also down there too, and be sure to connect with both of us on social media. Let us know if you have any questions about what we covered today, and until then, I will see you on the next one.